Hey there guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be covering a compilation of the RuneScape's Greatest Achievements series. And I would like to add that this is in no particular order. However, I have put some of the episodes that you might have missed over the season due to algorithmic disaster. Some of these episodes are absolutely outstanding and unfortunately just didn't quite get what they deserved, so I decided why not throw them all into one jam-packed video for you all today. I've also decided to take on the mantle of a RuneScape Reels channel, hosting daily highlights within the community. These will be short and sharp clips with both the credit to the creators while also being nice and consumable without rambling on about complete nonsense. So if you'd like to support the growth and development of that channel, I'll also leave the link up on screen and in the description. And without further ado, let's get stuck right into the content. Hey there guys, and welcome back to another episode of RuneScape's Greatest Achievements. In today's episode, we'll be showcasing one of the most anticipated and exciting area-locked Ironman series on the platform. Restricted to the bounds of Karamja, this man took on one of the most impressive challenges this game has to offer, achieving an Infernal Cape on an area-restricted account, and also adding to the extra difficulty of doing all of this as an ultimate Ironman. And the individual we'll be discussing today goes by the alias Verf. Verf was at heart an Ultimate Ironman, and had been since the release of the game mode. And as of present, he is in fact one of the very few that have managed to max out one completely. Thus bringing us his series, the Karamja Locked Ultimate Ironman, inspired by a fellow YouTuber known as Caveman Only, as well as his friend Karamja Only, presented with the same area restrictions. In early May 2018, Verf would set off on his journey. The only caveat to this adventure would be the completion of Druidic ritual before inhabiting the island for years to come. This would later on provide the ability to create the necessary potions needed for his end goal, being the Infernal Cape. And this was not going to be an easy task. What awaited Verf was long grueling hours of unorthodox grinds for such a restricted build. Verf would begin his grind with the intentions of working towards a Fire Cape as a sub-goal. To do so, he'd get stuck right into smithing and make an abundance of bronze knives to train his range. And the further we get into the video, you'll come to realize an abundance is simply an understatement. From the get-go, Verf would use his knives to shoot for one of the goals that we can all appreciate from over the years, the Rune Scimitar grind. This would propel his melee training exponentially, and remain his best in slot until he obtains the obsidian weaponry further in the future. Also, at this early stage of gameplay, Verf had very few ways to make decent money, so all the excess drops would go right back into bronze knives. And just a few days after the creation of the account, Verf had already managed to complete his first questline, Shiloh Village, cementing his position as another linchpin within the restricted Ironman community, and along the way he would become loved by very many. The cool thing about Karamja is that you can in fact train most skills. Though many will be exceptionally slow, it still is possible, and in this series you'll get to see all the little interesting methods to do so. In the clip below, Verf is restricted to curing Brutu victims in order to train Herblore, and though it is exceptionally slow, throughout the video we'll see great optimization. From the get-go, he'll hop around worlds until he finds the suitable victim. Now, these victims have an uncommon rate of spawning in the first place, which is then divided by 3 different variations, that being green, orange, and blue. And in this case, we only want green, making for an incredibly strenuous grind. Following Herblore, we have farming, or raking in this matter, as Verf can't actually begin farming until he unlocks fruit trees. which means he'll have to rake patches which are on a global timer from 1 all the way till 27 farming. If you haven't already caught on, everything on this island takes time, and a lot of it. Here up on screen, we have what I'd call Verf's early game gear, where he can still grab a pair of dragon legs and an obby cape, though at the speed he's developing at, he'll only use these for so long. Verf's underlying goal was first to achieve a fire cape as a stepping stone towards the Inferno. So for now, he needed to obtain an abundance of Tokkul for the obsidian rings, which he'd end up using on Jad. This meant more knives and more range levels. Following the completion of 80 range, Verf would knock out 38 herblore for his prayer potions, while his secondaries were obtained by killing a bunch of tribesmen. With all that being said, Verf now had his tank armor, obby rings, and his prayer potions, and though his gear is crude to say the least, it's more than enough for this man to take on the fight caves. So on the 11th of October 2018, Verf would set off to complete one of his long-awaited goals, the elusive fire cape. In the course of 4.5 months, Verf had completed one of his main goals, and much earlier than expected, which was due to the amazing amount of support he had garnered throughout his series. The issue Verf now faced following his mid-game completion was that all of his following grinds were restricted to a significant amount of lamping, which meant he'd focus more on his main and AFK train on the side for the next few months. And now Verf had completed 15 mining, he went on to finish up the Karamja Easy Diary, making the Tokkul grind sufficient enough to afford a full set of obsidian, obtaining his max melee just 6 months into the account. His next lamping target would be Slayer, giving access to Harpy Bug Swarms at level 33, which means he'd get stuck right into woodcutting and fletching to pass the time. Harpy Bug Swarms would bring life to clue juggling, making medium clues possible yet extraordinarily difficult. During his grind, Verf actually managed to complete 99 woodcutting along the way, which is a testament to how long lamping to 33 Slayer had actually taken him. At this point, Verf was determined to follow through with his goals of achieving the Infernal Cape, and to do so he realised he was going the wrong way about it. He would still shoot for some medium clue scrolls along the way, though he knew he had to shift his gaze over to Hunter, which subsequently meant more lamping. In early 2019, Verf would do some deep theory crafting, and with the help of his community would come up with a way to tackle the nibblers, which led to the rune throwing axes. These axes were dropped by the ninja implings, and he could also on the off chance grab a few lucky implings along the way. This also meant that he first had to lamp to 27 Hunter, then shoot for 99 Hunter before he could barehand his desired implings. Verf would catch over 54,000 Grax in order to achieve his goal of 99 Hunter, after a grueling amount of time lamping all these different stats for each individual goal. Over 350 hours of grinding so that he could finally barehand lucky implings, and thanks to his amazing community he would have a cohort of players calling impling spawns around the island. Verf would catch countless implings throughout the next few months while diligently working on both the Regent Bracelet and the Amulet of Fury. And as you can see on screen below, it was all working out for him, as he was ticking off items on the wish list left, right and centre. Through blood, sweat and tears, on the 4th of September 2019, Verf would defy all odds and achieve the rune crossbow, the final piece to the puzzle. He would then quickly follow suit with the completion of a 500-hour crafting grind, with a reward of not only a Fury, but even an ornament kit to go along with it. Verf would need Tokkul and lots of it, so he would go on to theorycraft a method with the help of his community to speed up his rates exponentially. If you were to kill a player in the fight pits, you would receive the amount of Tokkul equivalent to the user's combat level. So with the help of rock cakes and retribution, you could achieve an enormous amount of Tokkul per hour, which would then be used to buy both runes and the Regen bracelet. This method was so good in fact that we actually optimized it ourselves and utilized it for our Saga series last year, so thank you Verf for that. At this stage, Verf had just about everything he was going to need to tackle the Inferno, a few odd grinds here and there, though his gear was entirely complete. Everything was seemingly going to plan, until one fateful day. On the 29th of December 2019, Verf would end up dying and losing everything except his untradables to an unfortunate error of simply AFKing for too long. And though he had lost thousands upon thousands of hours worth of both regular and RNG grinds, he still had the determination to carry on. I feel like this chapter in Verf's story is a testament to his determination to achieve his goals, and to prove to his community and viewers that he was going to overcome all that he had set out to. Verf would then move on to reclaiming his lost items from lucky imps while working towards both his throwing axes and diamond bolt tips. And not too long after, he was blessed yet again with the prized possession of the rune crossbow. Everything was yet again falling into place, and after 750 hours of curing Brutu victims and cleaning Valencia moss, Verf would achieve his final goal required for the Inferno, being 81 Herblore. Verf had truly overcome all odds. Everyone that doubted his conviction had their eyes peeled for his next upload. His resolve was realized. He had practiced for countless hours in preparation for this very moment. And most importantly, he had what it takes to pull this all off. Verf would end up sinking over 200 hours into perfecting his obscure route in the Inferno, and he would do so by utilizing the Trailblazer League. This is a checklist of what he had to overcome before attempting on the Karamja locked account, as he didn't want to waste any of his supplies. And now, 3 years in the making, on the 29th of March 2021, Verf was finally ready to overcome the Inferno and complete his long-awaited journey. So without further ado, I will let this man's actions speak much louder than words. Verf really did stand up to the test of time and did what many could not. And that's following through with exactly what he said he was going to achieve. Though he went through some ups and downs, he was fortunate enough to have such an amazing community backing him all along the way. I believe I can say this from all of us, and that this series was truly one of the best throughout RuneScape history. And more importantly, one of RuneScape's greatest achievements. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, show your support by dropping us a like and a subscription. This will take you no longer than 2 seconds, and each and every one of you will make a difference. If you'd like to go and show some love to Verf, go and check out his channel, which will be linked with all his social medias in the description. And finally, if you haven't already, leave a comment down below on who you think we should cover next. These entries come directly from the comments, so make sure to do so. Hey there guys, and welcome back to RGA, or otherwise known as RuneScape's Greatest Achievements. In today's episode, we'll be covering something just a little bit different. I'll be taking you all through the journey of the Inferno, and how a select few individuals took it one step further, entering the realm of speedrunning. I'll give you all the inside scoop on one of the most challenging pieces of content in RuneScape history, and show exactly how these few talented individuals brought speedrunning to old school RuneScape. It started all the way back over the Christmas holidays in the year 2017, where the player known as Calvino would simply try and better himself by adjusting a number of different variables in order to optimize the waves. Calvino would both stream on Twitch and post his full runs on YouTube, which in turn garnered the interest of quite a few well-known players. These particular runs were brought to the attention of both Adwam and Turney all the way back in early 2018. Where they ended up developing a bit of a friendly rivalry, subconsciously going as fast as they could to see who could get the pet before one another. And who could have guessed that this particular rivalry would turn out to help shape the notion of speedrunning in old school RuneScape. Over the years, gear setups played one of the most integral parts in helping towards chipping away at the time. Whether it be from updates to small DPS calculations, shaving off the few seconds intertwines what it really means to be a speedrun in general. And as you can see on screen above, over the years we've seen a lot of change in terms of the gear setups from back then till now. Over time, barriers would develop that certain gear would help overcome, such as switching an arcane for an alley, over time reducing the damage received while setting up off ticks without the use of pillars. For example, you can see Adicon starting each wave in the center of the cave. As we get later into the waves, this will not change. Thus, the Elysian Spirit Shield will become the best in slot, due to its passive effect of a 70% chance to reduce all damage by 25%. By around mid-June 2020, the speedrun community had taken off, with a number of substantial names coming across the radar, all working together to better themselves and their peers. And with more minds on the matter at hand, they quickly came to the conclusion that hit points could be recovered over time, where the notion of time couldn't. In other words, even your magic attack bonus could be spared, creating more room for inventory conservation, as range defense bonus would prioritize over mage, meaning that you could drop the ancestral altogether. In conclusion, gear setups play an integral role in the development of subcategories that would determine the time barriers that you just couldn't surpass otherwise. And as of early 2020, the optimal gear setup had been realized, and a number of individuals would move on to the micromanagement of the changes in wave control. Alongside the new gear setup came the integration of an entirely new metagame, and brought together an array of highly skilled players from around the world, where they all gathered in one particular place. The Inferno Speedrunning Discord became the hub where all the runners would collaborate with one another in developing their current methods. They would even go as far as to create a substantial amount of resource packs for those who are interested in getting into running. So if you're interested, or even just keen to look into the resources and daily speedrun streams, head over to the Speedrunning Discord, link will be in the description. Over the following few months, these individuals came up with multiple strategies to help with their gear and inventory management. And a number of specific contributions that I'll discuss today had the most substantial impact on breaking what barely anyone had done before, beating the 50-minute mark. As of late 2019, only 2 had overcome the 50-minute mark, both Adwam and Jolanine. 2 absolute monsters in their own right, although the meta still had a long way to go. Thanks to the player known as Resh and his discoveries around removing Ancestral from the loadout in early 2020, both him and Corky would follow suit on breaking the barrier shortly after. Now, this introduction of the new loadout would also bring about changes in the regularity of chinning, as you'd switch to your alley and chins to deal with the mini blobs, hitting every 3 ticks as opposed to your 5 ticks with the barrage. This simple change would save you on average 3.3 ticks every set of minis. And with an advanced use of movement mechanics, clumping the bats and melees would achieve even more of a significant time save. For the most part, blood barraging nibblers would remain the same, although chinning the blobs alongside Bruise and the blowpipe spec would just about do the trick. And all of these healing mechanics would be perfectly complemented by the use of the Phantom Barrage, which, as you can see on screen above, is only used in very specific circumstances, but can ultimately help you survive the onslaught of the wave ahead. On the last NPC, when using a relatively quick projectile attack, for example the blowpipe, you can stack the monster with a blood barrage on the last tick, dealing no real damage but has the chance to heal you on whatever damage roll you receive. This mechanic wasn't used very often, but it did play a part in the mitigation of death. And reducing the risk of death was one of the most integral roles of this particular speedrun, as if you died you'd have to tutorial skip until you received another task. Unfortunately, tutorial skipping was essential, and in order to run you had to do so. By using Neve or Steve, you simply had a 6 to 7% chance of receiving a Zuck task, and on average this could take anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. So if you plan on running in the future, keep this in mind. 2-ticking revolutionized the reliability of speedrunning in its entirety. The increased versatility of 2-ticking made flicking 1 to 2 blobs while trying to off-tick both the range and major much more realistic, with significantly less clicks or room for error. And thanks to both Adwam and Exact, 2-ticking was brought to the forefront of speedrunning, making maneuverability much easier and decreasing the risk of missing your prayer flicks. This made the utilization of both the pillars and NPC drag distance a lot more viable, and you could realistically save a significant amount of time in doing so. An example of using the pillars or even far render distances of the NPCs would be to drag the monsters into clump range, meaning that over time you'd save both time and HP by chinning and phantom barraging. As I'm sure you've all seen by now, a lot of these concepts work the best when intertwined by one another, and in doing so is the only realistic way that a number of these runners are able to maintain consistent sub-50s. Fortunately for us today, this was around the time that speedrunning had caught the intrigue of the analytical titan himself, the player that goes by the name Adicon. A lot of the information you've seen today has come from Adicon himself, providing both his time, footage, and analytics. He's been a key asset to the speedrunning community and still to this day even holds the record itself, in which I'll go into further detail later on in the video. Jolanine, or otherwise known as Neen, was another key player invested into the speedrunning community, holding the record and even besting himself countless times over the course of 2 years. Neen was a pioneer in his own right, and he's always been kind and receptive to new players on the scene. Adwam, alongside the help of Exact, revolutionized the integration of various different game mechanics in the Inferno. He really was one of the originals, bringing popularity towards the subsect of speedrunning while streaming his runs on Twitch. Resh, as mentioned before, was the brains behind the loadout. Resh was a man to break the barrier that was so heavily reliant on RNG, and he did so many times over, remaining at the upper echelon all throughout his career. Corky, alongside both Adwam and Turney, was one of the early adopters of speedrunning, and he did so through Twitch, bringing further awareness around the topic. Corky also manages to remain in the top 5 record holders, along with holding rank 1 on his Ironman. Then there's Shawnee, holding multiple records across an array of different categories, all while remaining in the top 3 overall. These players, including those that I have little to no footage of, have all collectively contributed towards one final goal, one of the biggest barriers of the run, Tizkal Zuck. Over the course of the run, I'm sure you're all aware that there's a lot more that goes on behind the scenes which are in direct correlation to the player themselves. In particular, the decision making on where you are in space and time and how to react accordingly without wasting too many ticks in doing so. And when it comes down to sub 50s, in order to keep consistent, you must be able to read and react to your layout within less than 2 ticks. Otherwise, you simply won't meet your splits, and it's better off resetting before you even get to Zuck. This somewhat simple act really is a true testament to the player's abilities, and goes to show the quicker you can analyze your layout, the more consistent you'll become. Zuck splits nowadays boil down to the skips you take in regards to its spawns, and over time the skips have been extended to its absolute extremities. For a sub 55 run, you're expected to have great wave management alongside realistically skipping both the mages and Jad. And just to quickly put this all into perspective, an average cape time should range anywhere from 75 to 90 minutes, and that's likely skewed very heavily by cape selling in general. So ranging anywhere below 60 minutes is very impressive to say the least. Now when you break it down to sub 50s, this is a whole new ballpark. From an exponential point of view, you need to consistently manage your waves exceptionally, intertwine pillar health management with NPC drag, chin clumping, and much more. The sheer difficulty of this particular feat is so exceptional it's hard to even articulate. So with all that said, why don't we let the man who stands at the very top show us exactly what he's made of. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of those who've been directly involved in the development of speedrunning in Oldschool Runescape. And a big shout out to all of those who have been tirelessly grinding in their respective field, whether it be the Inferno or even the Theatre of Blood. And most importantly, you. The viewers who have made it this far into the video are the individuals that will play a massive role in the future of this type of content. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here today, I urge you to like this video. With your help, these players will garner the respect they truly deserve for their endless effort. It really is a mission in itself to put into words how impressive the feats of these individuals really are. And if you're interested in more, make sure to leave a comment down below on the various pieces of content that you'd like to see run. Hey there guys, and welcome back to another episode of RuneScape's Greatest Achievements. Or rather, in today's episode, you might as well consider this to be called RuneScape's Greatest Restrictions. Because the fact of the matter is, this man chose just about the most difficult journey you could undertake on OSRS. And fortunately for our viewing pleasure, our friend here has recorded just about his entire adventure from start to present. The individual that we'll be showcasing today is none other than a fellow creator that goes by the alias Lyfe. Lyfe began his journey back in August of the year 2020, where he had the ambitious goal of creating what they call an 807, or rather a reverse skiller. Mind you, in this case he would further restrict himself to 30 defense, with the goal of someday completing the set of Inquisitor. Now, you might be asking yourself, what exactly is an 807? Well, I asked myself the same question and came across some interesting rune wiki links. To summarize an 807, it's basically an account that cannot train any non-combat skills, therefore maxing out their total level would result in the number 807. Now, with all that said, Lyfe would then take on the challenge for himself, inspired by a fellow creator going by the name UIM Slay Only. For authenticity, he also wanted his series to stand out from all the rest, and it just so happens that The Nightmare was released earlier in that year. Therefore, he would centralize his goals around achieving the set of Inquisitor, without trading, banking, or even non-combat stats, which in turn restricts most of the game itself. And as you can see here below, very early into the account he had already begun to pay homage to his goals, the Inquisitor. Very early into the build, Lyfe would knock out 30 defense, for the most part unquested due to heavy restrictions, and here he would remain for the foreseeable future. During the early stages of the account, Lyfe would have a hard time running around unlocking areas to try and finish off clue scrolls. And he would attempt to juggle these wherever he got the chance, because most of his best in slots would come from these very clues. Not to mention, most of the uniques would end up being dropped, as not only does he have bank restrictions, but he doesn't even have access to a POH. To make things even worse, Lyfe can't even store items in stash units, because he can't even build them in the first place. This fact alone would increase the length of each clue exponentially, and imagine that while clue juggling in itself. The caveat to this particular build is that you can't fully appreciate the grind for gear until you hit all of these different roadblocks in terms of skilling, quests, and even area restrictions. For example, the Amulet of Power upgrade would literally remain the all-round best in slot with the exception of different scenarios for the entirety of the build. Sure, he could get lucky on a hard clue, a 1 in 1.6k, but that's unlikely. The Warriors Guild would turn out to be one of, or if not the greatest unlock for the 807 build, as it provides some of the best in-slot food and potions. Not to mention, once Lyfe reaches 99 strength, he'll have a teleport directly to the guild, making the replenishment of food and stats that much more efficient. Lyfe would also be able to receive the Dragon Defender here, and fortunately for him, he can complete Priest in Peril, meaning that in the future he can also go for the Evernic and other uniques to follow suit. Now, following the unlock of the Warriors Guild also came with a few more perks along the way, such as sufficient food to deal with the Mage Arena 2 bosses. Unfortunately, Prayer and Restore potions were quite tough to come by, or rather a bit of a mission to get carried through Tioga for those particular supplies, so this route was the way to go. Though it was a close fight, Lyfe actually managed to clutch a pseudo safe spot without prayer or food on his final boss. Now, not only would the MA2 cape be his best in slot, but it would also provide an increase on his max hits when he unlocks his trident, and the trident will be used for just about everything. This accomplishment ended up taking Lyfe around 5 to 6 hours of death spawns and juggling his gear to complete the cape, though it would turn out to be one of his greatest unlocks to date. Throughout the following months, Lyfe would attempt to knock out certain unlocks that would benefit him in the future, such as a Berserker Ring. Fortunately for him, with the use of ults to pull aggression, he managed to knock this one out in a swift 40 odd kills. And in regards to his gear, I'm sure he's very glad he didn't go dry on this one. This man really had full adamant armor with a staff of fire, and at this stage of gameplay you literally couldn't get worse. Not to mention, unbeknownst to Lyfe, on the 6th of January 2021, he would be able to double his strength bonus by imbuing his Berserker Ring through the release of Soul Wars. I feel like the greatest thing about this particular build is the thrill that you would get off such a minuscule upgrade in weaponry or armor, such as the Dragon Sword. And if you want to hear that enthusiasm, Lyfe actually has a channel of his own dedicated to this particular build, and I will leave his link in the description. Here we have one of what I call the top few goals of any account, 85 Slayer and the elusive Abyssal Whip, increasing Lyfe's offensive bonuses exponentially. I'd also consider this the turning point from mid to late game on this particular build, as the time actually gone into this is seemingly unfathomable. To follow suit, we have 87 Slayer and the Trident, and as I mentioned before, this would be Lyfe's most crucial offensive weapon for all raiding and bossing purposes. Lyfe had to jump through many hoops to get his inventory set up for the fight caves. The prayer potions and brews came from getting boosted through both Maiden and Bloat, then abandoning the raid and Sandview serums from Kraken. This was quite the accomplishment for Lyfe, as it was his first cape attempt with any kind of restrictions, which ended up taking him over 6 hours in the caves to achieve. And this would also subsequently turn out to be the best in slot cape for the duration of the account, up to the Inferno. Following the completion of 99 Attack, Lyfe went back to hunting clue scrolls, and ended up lucking out on ranger boots while grinding for the spiked manacles. And his luck would just continue on. Not soon thereafter, he would achieve the occult necklace, increasing damage output by 15% and making the nightmare grind that much more bearable. With Lyfe's newfound weaponry and gear, he would end up focusing his energy on his primary goal, the nightmare. And with all the tweaks and changes throughout the year, this would seem more troublesome to relearn the many different formats of the boss. Once Lyfe had the capability and confidence to camp the Nightmare, this is exactly what he did. And he would end up camping here until further changes would come between his goals. Following these changes to the drop table in mid-2021, Lyfe would divert his attention towards gearing up for the Chambers of Xeric and the Theatre of Blood. And he would start as seen below, by putting together the Brimstone Ring, which would turn out to be his best in slot for raids in general. Lyfe then had a group of his friends kindly assist him through both TOB and Chambers for further unlocks. And it's honestly amazing to see what such a restricted account can pull out of its arsenal, and this man is absurdly lucky to say the least. This luck would then carry on from TOB to Chambers, however to his dismay it would unfortunately be an item he can't even utilise due to his account restrictions. As of recently, Lyfe has achieved his Dragon Warhammer after a grueling 10,000 kill count. And as he plans to head back into the Nightmare, he'll be headed back with a vengeance, and some heavy offensive increases to go along with it. Today, Lyfe is still on the hunt for the final 2 pieces of Inquisitor through the Fasani's Nightmare. He's also managed to achieve both the pet and the egg for the transmog, which I do consider the most fitting for his particular build. As the game gets older, alongside the player base getting older, it's quite refreshing to see these new takes on interesting and restricted builds. Account restrictions have gone from something you'd class as a simple pure into so much more, such as area, stats, trading, and even banking restrictions. Various YouTubers over the years have brought these builds to the forefront of the community and molded these playstyles into the very game itself. Our friend here, Lyfe, is one of those individuals, so much so that there's even an RS wiki page dedicated to this particular build. And I would like to celebrate that dedication by getting this out to all of you guys. So show Lyfe and myself some support by dropping a like and a subscription. This really does go a long way in both awareness for these accomplishments and keeping the series moving in the right direction. Also, if you want to see what I get up to behind the scenes, head over to my Twitter at MaulerOSRS, which will be up on screen and linked in the description. Now, with all that said, let's sit back and watch Lyfe achieve one of his biggest goals to date, maxing out the stats of his build that he started so long ago. And this is the 807. As of the 17th of January 2022, Lyfe has now maxed his combat-only account. And though it's such a monumental achievement, I have a feeling that we'll see much more to come from this man in the future. If you feel like I did this man justice today, drop a comment down below. And while you're at it, leave me some suggestions on who you think we should cover next. Your continued support and enthusiasm really is what keeps the series alive to date, so make sure to do so. Thankfully, there has been no shortage of both achievements and/or beautifully crafted accounts. Today we'll be savouring the taste of a mixture between the two. This individual has the lack of both defense and prayer, and loves theory crafting pet hunting metas with his restrictions in mind. The player we'll be discussing today goes by the alias Tioga. Tioga started his RuneScape journey back in the year 2014 during his summer holidays. Unfortunately, back then, clients were barely a thing, so he had no footage between those first few years. Luckily for us, it just so happens the original iteration of Tioga was just your run-of-the-mill 60 attack, 52 prayer pures. Tioga was funnily enough introduced to the niche pure community by not only one of my old generals, but actually his twin brother Ithaca. Before Tioga's claim to infamy, he would be spotted mostly in Bounty Hunter and PvP on his new G Mauler. Here he would remain for a hot minute while he grinded BH ranks and would typically play just for PvP. He was steadfast in his enjoyment for PvP until late 2014, when he found the YouTuber Rendy achieve the first fire cape on a pure, opening new horizons for Tioga. This accomplishment would spark a whole new route for the build. Though the mechanics at the time were widely unknown, he was fortunate enough to be with the right group of individuals. This would save him the trouble of discovering the original Fight Cave mechanics for one prey capes, and only a few months later, Tioga would have one for himself. Shortly after achieving his fire cape, he was made privy to the community Pure Crew, which led him towards other like-minded individuals that had niche accounts just like himself. These players, in particular both Buds and Paradox, would encourage Tioga to switch up his playstyle and start going for various different pets and achievements while on a restricted account. Now, this was most certainly very early days, so there was little to no competition, though the pet hunters would all come together and work on and share methods with one another. These methods would entail specifically pet hunting, and throughout the video there will come instances you'll question without a doubt. Keep in mind, all of Tioga's achievements have been realized without prayer, so all of the grinds you're going to see here today are difficult to even fathom the amount of time gone into these particular feats. You may have noticed that some of these clips have actually been taken from Dragon's Archive, as these guys actually work together on many of these methods that will be showcased today. As of the 2nd of the 2nd, 2022, Tioga has achieved a total of 29 pets throughout his journey, some skilling, though mostly are just boss pets. Those that'll be specifically covered today are the few outstanding grinds that showcase proper mastery of mechanics, and a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking. On screen above, one of Tioga's most grueling and heart-wrenching grinds was the Chambers of Xeric. Tioga and his friends would theory craft their own unorthodox methods to deal with each specific room. Some would clearly be a little easier than others, however maintaining consistency would be key here to increase the chances of the omelette. Tioga would tackle the Mutadile by placing ults at the door to pull aggression. When the aggro switches to him, he'll ticky an average of 3 attack cycles while keeping a reasonable distance. This would ensure he'd maintain his original supplies, as he'd most certainly need them later. You may have also noticed in the clip below that his team mainly consists of pures with and without prayer, which really goes to show how comfortable they've all become with the various different bosses. Other rooms, such as Mystics, are done in a similar fashion to any other account builds such like a main, although the pure would stay out of range until lured as seen below. Once lured and all the Mystics are aggressed towards the ult, the pure is free to corner trap and safe spot the lot, taking into consideration the layout of the room. Now, in order to gain more points, Tioga can also tick-eat the tightrope, and deal extra damage, adding towards his loot potential in the future. All these small little instances of damage will not only gain Tioga a higher potential, but it'll also speed up the raid exponentially. Tioga would put all of his collective knowledge into min-maxing both his DPS and time spent raiding, and push himself well beyond the status quo. He would end up clocking in over 600 regular raids, and even a few CMs to top things off. The most grueling thing about this particular grind is that Tioga actually achieved the Olm pet back at 400 KC. Not only was this well deserved in the first place, he actually had a pet out and a full inventory, meaning he remains the only player to ever receive the Olmlet pet on his collection log without actually ever having one in the first place. And if that isn't a kick in the teeth, I really don't know what else is. Apart from pet hunting on a heavily restricted account, Tioga went all out on skilling as well, giving himself the highest rates possible in each and every skill. Here, for example, you see Tioga using the Arceus spellbook to teleport right outside the Mind Altar, which is considered the maximum efficiency Rift Guardian rate without any pouches. And the reason why he didn't have any pouches was because he hadn't the requirements for Lunar Diplomacy or 99 rune crafting. Nevertheless, by using this particular method, Tioga had managed to achieve his Rift Guardian pet within less than 2 weeks. One of Tioga's early goals was to achieve the Wildy boss pets, including Callisto, Venenatus, Scorpia, Vedion, and the Chaos Elemental. All of these bosses were achieved through lures outside their aggression zones, with the exception of Scorpia. So these weren't necessarily difficult, rather than both a time consume and also the threat of PKers. However, Tioga would take this element of the game in stride, especially when considering his background within the PvP community. The fact that these particular bosses are in PvP also add to their scarcity exponentially, as most PvMers tend to avoid these areas entirely. In regards to that, having all 5, let alone without prayer, makes this achievement that much more respectable. Throughout the next couple of years, Tioga and friends would put their minds together to come up with some very unorthodox methods to tackle certain bosses more efficiently. For example, in the clip below, Tioga would utilize the rapid attacks from the Smoke Devil to his advantage by proccing the Phoenix Necklace at under 20% of his maximum HP. Due to the consistent damage, interrupting your attack cycle by eating would simply run an account with very little mage defense into the ground after a single kill. This method would ensure roughly 3 to 4 kills every trip, while also increasing the speed without skipping attack cycles. Now, in my perspective, I feel like the Theatre of Blood is one of the most interesting pieces of content to do without prayer, and it just so happens that there's now both the chance of the pet and the transmog. In regards to Maiden, this room can be classed as a simple melee DPS with a few little tweaks here and there. When dealing with the crabs, Tioga will focus N1 and 2, which refers to North Crabs 1 and 2. Then he'll cross Maiden and deal with South Crab 1. This will ensure that he does not only keep a fair distance away from Maiden, he also cleans up the stragglers so the mains can focus DPS on the boss. The only other notable difference here is that he'll put himself last in the ore border, which will not only have some further effects later on, but it'll also ensure the least amount of aggression from the Maiden. Another interesting encounter is the Nilo room, where the waves are more or less self-explanatory. The boss can be dealt with in a few interesting little ways. Firstly, as seen below, Tioga can walk underneath the boss and simply grab a hit off after the Nilo's attack cycle. Now, if you want to increase the difficulty, you can have the mains walk Nilo towards the barrier, where you can flinch while using the right-click leave action on the door. Just before we get stuck into the main event, that point that I touched on earlier in regards to the ore border will always come in handy at Zarpus, where he'll aggress specifically in the order of the orb, putting you last in the slot. And finally, we have the most interesting room, Verzik. Now typically, Tioga will play as safe as possible to mitigate any type of risk of damage. So in P1, the pillars will protect him from all incoming damage. Tioga's P2 Verzik is for the most part very clean with little to no mistakes, where he'll only incur any damage if he's hit by mage later on into the phase. Tioga will also strategically place some brews along the ground. In the case that he dies, his teammates still have plenty of supplies to finish off the KC. And seeing each kill count takes roughly half an hour, it's more important that they clear the KC rather than conserve supplies. Also, I don't actually have a clip of it, however what can be done to eliminate all damage during P2 would be to run to the western corner and walk up and down the map chunk. This will negate every single AoE attack during this phase. Lastly, we have P3, one of the most grueling phases where Tioga will die quite frequently due to the amount of DPS dealt to him, and in most cases it's usually better to leave the mains the brews that have been left on the ground. The issue with this phase is that the only thing you can do without prayer is chug brews and restores to maintain your attack cycles and simply hope that you survive for an increased loot potential. Tioga has also stacked over 200 hard mode kill count, and though he hasn't been all that lucky, I can only imagine the level of flex once he gets some uniques. I must say, this grind seems to be not only the most enjoyable, but also the most rewarding, and to put the nail in the coffin, there always seems like there's going to be room for improvement. Tioga really has acquired quite the abundance of outlandish pets and achievements, so much so that I feel it quite rude skimming over some of them. Fact is, there is just too many to cover. However, the final accomplishment that I would like to cover here today is the Nextling. Sure, there is an incredible amount of luck involved here, especially in regards to the mass, but having a Nextling pet without prayer? There's literally no words to describe how absurd that really is. Tioga started his Nextling grind a week after release, and realised that he could stay indefinitely with the essence received from the boss room. He would also tank for the masses as compensation for completely avoiding the smoke phase, as this would deal in upwards of 50 damage when in close proximity to Nex. All in all, if you would choose any boss to get lucky on given his respective build, it would be this one. And that's exactly what he received. A couple weeks after release, Tioga would become the first and only no overhead pure with a Nextling. Today, Tioga is primarily working towards both CMs and hard mode TOB, to not only reclaim his coveted Olm pet, but to also shoot for those transmogs. He also mentioned to me that as soon as Raids 3 comes out, he'll be switching his attention towards that, and he'll go full throttle towards the pet grind. I really do hope that I did a good job at showcasing some of Tioga's greatest achievements today, and I'd love for all of you to let me know in the comments section below if you appreciated this kind of content. This is the type of content that I love to create. I really do enjoy both giving back to the community that works so hard to create such spectacular accounts, and I love the journey that much more. So if I did this man justice today, leave a like on the video. Show Tioga and myself you appreciate the effort that he puts in. And again, if you have any ideas on individuals with great accounts and or achievements, drop their RSNs in the comment section below. It really was an absolute pleasure putting this together, and I hope with the help of all of you, I will have plenty more where that came from. And finally, my Twitter will be up on screen and linked in the description. I post separate little tidbits and clips over there, so make sure not to miss out on any of the action. White Wyvern began his journey all the way back in the Christmas holidays in the year 2016. Starting with his original hardcore Ironman, Viper Nova, his goal was to build a unique form of skillet restricted to members-only skills while remaining level 3. Wyvern got stuck right in with thieving upon the creation of his account and managed to complete 99 within the short end of the month. Hardcore Ironman was released on November the 10th, 2016, so as a fresh game mode also came with a lot of competition. Wyvern managed to reach 99 thieving in 46th place, although he wanted to push even further. He had plans to go all the way for 200 mil and solidify the rank 1 position just like he had done before on his original Ironman Night Viper. Throughout the coming months, Wyvern managed to make his way to rank 2, hitting the milestone of 50 mil thieving on February the 15th, 2017. Wyvern soon came to the conclusion that restricting an already heavily restricted account was seemingly counterproductive, and decided that he'd follow suit and convert to a hardcore Ironman skiller with no other restrictions other than obviously combat. By the time March had rolled through following the milestone of 100 mil thieving, Wyvern realised he hadn't a chance to catch rank 1, and came to the decision to divert his attention towards 1000 total, swiftly achieved by the 28th of May 2017. Over the following few months, Wyvern took a hiatus from thieving, and polished off a number of skilling 99s along the way. At this stage, he didn't have much of a plan, but understood the foundations of an Ironman through the development of Night Viper, which started way back in 2014. Throughout the following year, Wyvern tackled many more 99s with speed unrivaled. 99 after 99, Wyvern just kept on progressing at such an impressive speed he even managed to reach 150 mil thieving XP, maintaining his rank 2 position. He continued to skill hop, quickly increasing ranks and holding a respectful position on the high scores, even while remaining level 3. Although this would only last for so long, until one fateful day. On the 18th of April 2018, Wyvern was on his routinely farm run for herblore supplies, a run that he had done thousands of times before. After countless 99s achieved at record pace and even nearing 200 mil experience in thieving, Night Wyvern would meet his end to a level 44 jungle spider on the docks of Brimhaven. 3,176 hours into the account, you'd expect any sane person to just bite the bullet and continue the account. Though, fortunately for this story, White Wyvern is no regular man. Not even a day later, Wyvern had left the past in the past and decided to start again from scratch, with the goal of maxing as a hardcore Ironman skiller. And this time, with over 2 years of gameplay on the particular build, Wyvern was more experienced and had been well versed in the certain things he should finish up earlier into the account. With the boost of early level nostalgia, Wyvern got stuck right into the build, progressing at lightning speed, all while following a familiar path that he had done before, with the helpful boost of less restrictions. Learning from his oversights from the past, Wyvern tackled all the quests early into the account to make sure that he had the capability to complete all the RNG-based quests. And remember, this was all done before both dialogue and spawn manipulation were known to the public, so combat experience was used only in the most crucial moments. One of these would be Demon Slayer, which isn't technically necessary as he had been able to complete the Observatory quest, though in the forethought that there may be Kudo requirements in future updates, he smashed this one out as well. Following the completion of all the possible Kudo quests, Wyvern had his greatest unlock to date, which would go on to be one of the biggest driving forces into his account. Released on the 7th of September 2017, Fossil Island would hold a large number of gathering activities such as herbivore for hunter and herblore, seaweed for crafting, and birdhouses for a large number of herblore secondaries. Wyvern knew that using Fossil Island as early into the account as possible would turn out to be one of the most efficient routes, as mostly every activity on the island were considered zero time, which let him stack most of his late game supplies very early into the build. Another benefit to his lengthy herbivore grind would be the fossils that he can bank during the ordeal, garnering him 50 Slayer. Keep in mind, he's both level 3 and his account at this stage is only 24 days old. This guy is a literal speed demon. And not only that, he's also got some incredible RNG to go along with it. And when I say lucky, I really mean it. 3 days later, he's got a third pet, all while remaining under 1,000 total. 3 pets in less than a month? Why don't we just make that 4? Following this outrageous amount of pets, Wyvern set his eyes on base 80s to slowly but surely increase his total level. Not so long after base 80s, Wyvern was already climbing up to a bunch of 99s, and he had done so in such an order in which he would optimize his leveling in the most efficient manner. Through Herbivore, he had managed to garner an array of bankable experience, including both 700k in Herblore and 120k in Slayer, achieved in a little over 3 weeks. By the 11th of July 2018, Wyvern was climbing the ranks in his respective build quite quickly, achieving rank 2 in a little over 80 days. His next 99 on the list would be fishing, which isn't too fancy as the most efficient method you could have done at the time would have been 3-tick fishing. And this would also mark the day that Wyvern would go public with his account, announcing it on Twitter and releasing his first progress video on his build. Over the years, Wyvern's put together a bit of a slideshow montage of his progress, and if you'd like to see that in a bit more of a raw form, I'll leave the link in the description. Moving on to thieving, one of Wyvern's favourite skills. He knocked this out through the use of RD Knights, while keeping a careful eye on his hit points. 99 thieving garnered him over 15 mil GP, and he had a plan to continue till 20 mil. He would then transition onto the Master Farmer, where he'd get the remaining 180 mil XP, banking 200 mil farming and Hunter passively. On the 1st of November 2018, Wyvern would achieve both 1337 total and 99 mining. Although through Motherlode he'd only managed to mine enough for 92 smithing, so he had planned to stick around till 21 mil XP. Fortunately for Wyvern, this also marked the release of OSRS Mobile, which meant that he could passively play while at work, resulting in hours increasing significantly. And just like that, in a little over a month, Wyvern had kicked back with 99 smithing. And not only 99, but take a look at his bank. 310,000 silver bars, which grossed him 4 mil smithing experience and would result in not only 99 crafting, but also fletching as well. On the surface level, this may seem like such an XP waste, but it's completely on the contrary. As a hardcore Ironman skiller, this is one of the most efficient culmination of experience you could actually achieve. And upon seeing this for myself, I was delightfully impressed to see something a little different from your conventional routes. From this point onward, I'll dig a little bit deeper into these intricate Wii methods that may even rival what you see on your day-to-day YouTube videos. And as you can see below, Wyvern has multiple books in his inventory, which was a method used by few all the way back in 2018, popularized on a video made by Wooks. This would be done by firstly gathering imp boxes, to then use those to bank multiple of the same book, followed by grabbing 2 of each from the bank. Once you had your books, you'd then head back to the library and start handing them in for an impressive 60k XP per hour. By utilizing this method, Wyvern managed to complete 77 rune crafting and move on to blood runes within the week. And just to put this into perspective, I feel like this took me a couple of months to bring myself to complete this hell of a grind. As I mentioned before, Wyvern learnt from his prior experience and tackled his 99s in the most efficient route possible. To the naked eye, you'd expect him to be camping teaks, though Wyvern would approach woodcutting with a little bit of a broader perspective. His greater goal wasn't to go for 99 woodcutting, it was there to simply assist him in his journey towards 99 construction, which would unlock an unfathomable amount of transport for an Ironman skiller. After a very lengthy grind, on the 7th of April 2019, Wyvern would go on to achieve 99 construction. Though he wouldn't stop there. He would continue on to reach rank 1, garnered by the woodcutting grind he did at Oaks, cutting over 330,000 of them, and going from 94 to 20 mil XP in just 2 to 3 days. Wyvern was out here for ranks, and he had already shown his charisma to get them done on multiple occasions. In 365 days, he managed to achieve 7 99s and 2 rank 1s. And don't forget, he's literally done this on 2 separate accounts. Over the next few months, Wyvern would continue to skill hop while maintaining his routinely birdhouse and farm runs. He would set his eyes towards base 90s to not get too caught up in one skill and burn out. Not only that, but he'd also frequent the dig site finds, as one of his long-term goals was to achieve max total level on his hardcore Ironman skiller, and remain at the top of the entire skiller leaderboard. Wyvern's unique skilling process was based around his long-term goals, and his work ethic and dedication is shown all throughout his various feats. As shown below, Wyvern planned to pickpocket the Master Farmer until 66 mil XP, which would in turn bank 99 Herblore in Aventos and Toadflax alone. Over the course of 5.5 months, all the farm runs had paid off. Through blood, sweat and tears, Wyvern would do 90 herb runs each and every week, marking his greatest achievement to date, 99 Herblore on a hardcore Ironman skiller, a feat that had never been achieved before. And just once again, I'd like to reiterate that from what I've showcased today, there's so much more that goes on in the background, such as screenshots, stats, and analytics. So much so that it would be impossible to cover it all in just one video. And I chose to mention that again because what comes next is just ridiculous. Over the following year, Wyvern had set his goal on rank 1 skiller, a goal that he could realistically achieve. His patience had finally caught up with him, and he could realistically start raking in the heavily banked experience alongside completing all of his passive 99s. Wyvern had made over 11 million unfinished silver bolts, ready to be fletched for over 27.5 million experience, all while training both runecrafting and agility towards the goal of 99. And just like that, Wyvern would go on to complete 2 of his 3 remaining 99s within the same day, cementing his position as one of the most coveted skillers of all time. Over the course of 4 years, Wyvern had proven his absolute dominance within the skilling community, competing with not only his iron adversaries, but even giving regular skillers a run for their money. On the 19th of July 2020, Wyvern had finally maxed as a hardcore Ironman skiller, after dying so far into his first account. This really is a true testament to his steadfast dedication, and I had to take a step back and really appreciate both the time and balls it would take to max this type of account. Today, Wyvern's character is still kicking, and he hasn't slowed down one bit. He continues to work on post 99s and 200 mils, all while having the true goal of 99 Slayer. By the end of 2022, Wyvern has the goal of achieving 1600 total, a completely max skiller, all while having the restrictions of a hardcore Ironman. And from what we've all seen today, my money is on Wight Wyvern, one of the most impressive skillers I've seen to date. Hey there guys, and welcome back to another episode of RuneScape's Greatest Achievements. In today's segment, we'll be taking a look at Expeditive, one of RuneScape's most decorated 10 HP accounts that has managed to exceed absolute perfection. This man has accomplished feats that were deemed impossible by the masses, and overcame achievements that I can't wait to showcase to you all today. So, without further ado, I bring to you the perfect 10 HP Ironman account, Expeditive. Expeditive began his journey back in late 2020 with the goal to create an optimal account for rushing in PvP. Although this would soon change ever so slightly, as he not only wanted to still create this particular build, he also wanted to perfect it, all while remaining 204 HP XP, or otherwise known as gaining absolute 0 hit points experience. Now, this would be achieved by a various number of old spawn manipulations as shown on screen, and many other specific methods that would be required to bypass certain quest mechanics. It is also quite refreshing to actually see some of these old clips again, especially after Jagex removed melee spawn manipulation for whatever reason. I still actually don't know why. And you can still actually spawn manipulate with a projectile, like using a cannon. Nevertheless, Expeditive would use these mechanics to his advantage to knock out a bunch of early game quests that would require the risk of spawn manipulation. These particular methods would also have a factor of risk, as you needed to release your interface within a 0.6 second window. And by releasing your interface too early, you could run the risk of gaining unwanted hit points experience, which would in turn ruin the account. Though as you can imagine from the title, Expeditive over here has clearly managed to complete just about everything he can possibly achieve to absolute perfection. And throughout this episode, we'll find out exactly how. As you can see, this type of account also has the utilization of dialogue manipulation. You definitely can work around it with combat, but this just makes it extremely easy. During the time, Expeditive also ran into a number of instances where you still would risk combat experience and manage to come out unscathed. And during the fight with Delorith, you must also attack the demon at least once with the Silverlight that just so happens to have an increased accuracy bonus against the demon. Nowadays, we have the use of Poison Dynamite that removes the risk altogether, which I'll later showcase on my Ultimate Ironman series. Expeditive also had to complete quite a significant amount of clue scrolls for purple sweets which were essential for completing certain bosses. He also chose to open his caskets on Intrana, which removes the rolls of all combat-related items, thus receiving a higher chance for both page set completions and obviously purple sweets. And during this grind, he did actually manage to complete most of his page sets in preparation for the release of Poison Dynamite in the coming future. And this is also where Expeditive's goals would finally solidify, as at the time, we were all teased with the possibility of future updates revolving around an item that could deal real damage without granting combat experience. Depending on where said item could be used was still unknown, however he wasn't wavered in his goals for perfection, so he started knocking out everything he could before this coming update. One of these particular goals was completing Shadow of the Storm, which on surface level seems like a cakewalk, but you couldn't be further from the truth. Thankfully, following the clue scroll grind, Expeditive had amassed well over 200 purple sweets, which gives you one singular chance to Tiki and recoil Agrith Nar. This boss also has a teleport mechanic that can actually stack you out, which is why overeats like Guthix Rests are completely essential. One mistake and that could be over 200 hours down the drain. Following the release of Song of the Elves, you couldn't use a cannon anymore within the caves. Though at the time you could still spawn manipulate, which was necessary for the completion of Underground Pass. This also unlocked the Crystal Bow following the completion of Regicide and Roving Elves, granting a key item for Wilderness Slayer. Expeditive is, from what I believe, one of 2 accounts with Underground Pass complete without HP XP. However, he also took the time to theorycraft and help cultivate a method for both Contact and Iclarin's Little Helper. Following the changes that were made to help support the quest Beneath Cursed Sands, you now didn't need to inflict any real damage to the Scarab. This used to be one of few quests that were just plain out of reach for many restricted accounts, but now with the use of new game mechanics it had become possible to complete even on a skiller, though it did still require a significant amount of skill to say the least. By waiting for the aggression timer to run dry at the back of the cave, the Scarab will still target you, although his minions will spawn during his special attack unaggressive. Once 3 minions have spawned, the Scarab can't roll a special attack chance anymore, so you're free to tick eat the boss until his HP hits 0. Following the completion of Contact, Expeditive still had a few things to touch up on before the release of Dynamite that had been both playtested and announced to come out on the 6th of December 2022. The release of Dynamite was a rocky road to say the least. The accuracy wasn't calculated properly and it also just plain didn't work in certain circumstances. Soon thereafter, by the 13th of December, Dynamite was re-evaluated by Mod Ash and was working as intended, which is what truly kicked this account into gear. Following all the reworks to Poison Dynamite, Expeditive was now finally able to complete Horror from the Deep. By death spawning a significant amount of pineapple, he could then cut them into rings to produce 4 pieces of food per inventory slot. In doing so meant that he could bring more dynamite down for a greater chance at actually pulling off damage, as for some reason it's still just so inaccurate even though it rolls off both your fire making level and your highest bonus. This would also require a reasonable amount of concentration, as if you are even 1 tick off during the entire battle, you risk the chance of having to start all over again. Before said update, Expeditive was also going for 75 Slayer in order to try and utilize the dynamite on the gargoyles for the coveted Granite Maul. The pictures I have truly don't represent the amount of effort that went into this outrageous feat. 75 Slayer would have taken such a stupid amount of time, from the making of cannonballs to dealing with PKs and even having to use body block ults for various tasks. All of this to go for one of the most overpowered weapons in the game, the Granite Maul. Unfortunately for us, Jagex agreed to some of the feedback given by the playtesters in regards to the Temple Guardian, and made it so that you can actually kill him with the poison dynamite. Back in the day, you could still do this, but you either had to gain combat experience or be naughty like me and break in the back way. Now with access into Mauritania, Expeditive could move on to the grind for the Granite Maul. To guarantee venom, the ult would need both a Serp Helm and a Staff or Trident of the Swamp. You'd then airstrike and hope to hit a 1. This would give the gargoyle time to reheal to full before the venom tick runs down. However, in this circumstance, you need to inflict damage between the reheal to full and the venom tick in order to grant you the kill credit, which adds a lot more room for error and makes the grind significantly longer. Also, a little tidbit about gargoyles in general, they were the first NPC in the game that had been intentionally altered by Jagex to stop spawn manipulation before the global removal. And to add to that, nothing was ever mentioned about this, it was just straight up removed and never spoken of again. At this stage, there are no other words to describe this account other than absolute perfection. But what's next to come are an accumulation of some of the most impressive utilizations of game mechanics that I have ever seen. You could say this build is realistically already complete, although Expeditive not only wanted to give over 110%, he wanted to blow everyone out of the water. Alright. It's time to all fasten your seatbelts because this is where it gets extremely mechanical. I'll try to explain it exactly how it's intended, although it still may get pretty confusing. What I'll showcase here is the process of smuggling a cannon into Recruitment Drive for the combat segment of the quest to ensure 0 hit points experience. Firstly, as you can see, Expeditive has gotten himself pre-poisoned from a cave crawler and quickly teleported to both bank his items and get into the Recruitment Drive cutscene. Once inside, the poison tick timer has frozen, although he's still technically poisoned nonetheless. From here, he's going to run through till he gets to Sir Lay. Now, all he needs to do is pick up 4 weapons on the table in order to spawn a gravestone. And he's going to do this by relogging and then sitting under the login screen. This will act exactly the same as any other high priority queue, such as a quest log or any on-screen interface. This will reset the poison timer within the void, taking down underneath a high priority queue which will proc the poison as it's the first thing queued behind the login screen. I do apologise for all the technical jargon, but this really is only half of said jargon. By then death spawning again with the necessary items for the boss fight, you can now collect your items from the original gravestone within the Recruitment Drive cutscene. Following the completion of some profound quests for his particular build, Expeditive and his friend Lava Lure cultivated a number of methods and lures for the Wilderness bosses before the impending rework of the Wilderness. This would involve the use of both a lure of the Callisto and many Retribution ults. And because Expeditive is an Ironman, he can freely kill the Retri accounts in multi to inflict damage on the Callisto without gaining any combat experience. And as you can see on screen below, they also figured out a similar method and lure on Vedion. Expeditive also managed over 500 KC at the Chaos Elemental, receiving the pet at 500 KC on the dot. Following a few hundred hours in the Wilderness, our crazy friend over here decided it would be a good idea to theorycraft for some of the final quests even feasibly possible. By forcing a 1-to-1 boulder attack through the use of an impressive lure, Expeditive could slowly chip away at Rock's health with both the cannon, recoils, and Guthix restores to overheal. And once he was out of recoils, he could then fire the cannon and flinch the bird around the umbrella, just out of range from the boulders. The following and final 2 achievements of this video have to be some of the most well thought out and impressive uses of both game mechanics and intellect all wrapped up into one. I would suggest to go and check out Expeditive's channel after this video to take a look at some of the more in-depth versions of some of these quests and boss fights that you've seen here today. To jam-pack all this material into one single video is a simple injustice to say the least. But I feel like if I explain anything more in depth like Recruitment Drive, we'll be here for far too long. This boss is both immune to poison and recoils, so the workaround for this one is absolutely insane. As you can see on screen, the NPC's attack speed when inflicted with poison in an unorthodox manner is reduced significantly. Trading 1-for-1 blows just won't work with the supplies at hand, so both sitting in safe spots while wind striking to force the NPC to shift and using an animation stall to force a card attack is the way to go. Now with the attack speed reduced and all the safe spots accounted for, Expeditive can move between locations while getting 4 attacks off on each rotation depending on the spawn. For the final segment of today's video, I'm stoked to be able to share with you all today Mage Arena 2 on absolute steroids. I thought I'd save the most perplexing achievement for last, because this one is truly within another realm. Fortunately, with the introduction of Poison Dynamite, all 3 Mage Arena bosses have no immunity towards the damage, which means you can actually gain the kill credit. By the use of an animation stall after a specific lure against Justicar, you can stack up quite a number of hits behind many different stalls. Attacking with melee will allow for a single tick of clearance to start up your animation stall. In this case, the Cooking Cape will stack up on average 7 to 8 hits of recoil damage. And because Expeditive is sitting at full HP being only 10, Justicar will roll a max hit pretty much every single time, dealing 2 damage with most recoil hits. By using the Wilderness Crab teleport, Expeditive was able to return in under 2 minutes, making sure that Justicar wouldn't despawn, which we'll see a lot more of in the following 2 NPCs. Moving on to Parazda, or rather we'll just call him the Zami boss to make it easy. After death spawning a bunch of food for overheals and having the ult body block Zami from behind, Expeditive can run west and de-aggro to start with the Poison Dynamite. And fortunately with the Fizz animation, he actually has time to get back to the safe zone before the dynamite blows. The animation stall method can also be used on this guy as well, although the length of the time it takes to actually get back here makes it worth it to death spawn over the stall. And finally, we have Derwin, which is just plain absolutely ballistic. The first 2, yeah, they're reasonable. They take a little bit of time and concentration through tick eating and a bunch of animation stalls, but they have absolutely nothing on this one. In the entire heat map, there is only 1 single spawn that makes this method possible. And to put this into perspective, it took Expeditive over 200 hours to both receive the spawn and have the time to complete what comes next. Okay, so the green lines represent the Power Sphere activation distance, the yellow lines represent Derwin's natural wander distance, and the purple lines represent the aggression zone. Stepping out of the aggression zone will force Derwin to walk back to his natural wander zone, which is far enough out of the way for the orbs to activate. Expeditive will then run to one of his other death spawns to continue flinching with recoils, rinse and repeat. Not to mention you also need to remain in combat with this guy just like the other bosses, otherwise he'll despawn after 2 minutes. Expeditive also utilized what I call a reverse ticky to have Derwin roll a 10 with a projectile while overhealing, dealing 2 damage with a recoil. And with over 4 hours of tick eating and force movements to avoid his special attack, Expeditive completed what was thought to be completely impossible, a 10 HP, 0 XP Mage Arena 2 cape. With that said, Expeditive is certainly up there with some of the most mechanically skilled individuals and has one of the most impressive accounts I've covered to date. Again, if you want to check out his channel, I urge you to do so, and I'll leave the link in the description. Expeditive has also sent me a few of his future goals for the build, which I reckon I'll keep a secret for the possibility of a future upload. And if you guys would like to see more of these videos in the future, drop some names in the comment section below that you think should be eligible for a showcase. I'd really love to see some of the more talent that we have out there. One last thing to note before the end of the video, I've just released the new membership subscriptions on this channel. So if you want to help towards another Rendy x Mauler America tour, make sure to drop a subscription and maybe even become a member while doing so if you really want to support us. I hope you all enjoyed today's video, and as always, have a lovely day.